Many Flesh and Blood players have asked the question, Living Legend format when? And as promised by James White himself in an interview with ISP over a month ago, we now have our answer. The LL format will debut at Worlds in November, as an everything goes, all heroes legal, nothing banned, no holds barred format.
So the Living Legend format will officially debut at the World Championship in Barcelona.
Now the excitement around this is real, which I think is fantastic. People should enjoy the game however they choose to. On the other hand, I question if folks are really truly ready to head back to the times of Starvo and Ball Lightning Briar. Decks that, when they were in their prime, were met with cries of degeneracy. And the only thing I conclude is that the Fab player base, or at least the vocal ones, hate the concept of rotation more than they hate the concept of an unbalanced game. A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Hey there, Flesh and Blood folks, and welcome back to Dice Commando and Go Again, a fabulous cast. Now today I'm talking the Living Legend format and how it really brings up one of the oldest and perhaps most debated topics in all of gaming, and that is rotation. Some people absolutely hate it, others view it as a necessary evil. And headed into the World Championships in Barcelona, we finally have the published Living Legend format. It's effectively classic constructed with one small thing: everything, absolutely everything, is legal. Now, the Living Legend format brings all cards back to be legal and playable once again, but it brings back all cards to be legal and playable once again.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Now, as we go through today's video, take a minute and leave a comment below, right down there, to let me know if you're excited about the LL format, what you think will be fun, and hit like while you're at it. Now, this video will automatically, let's be honest, just get a dislike or 6 from the anti-rotation crowd folks who, as soon as they hear the word, can tend to get pretty aggressive. People thinking that maybe I'm pooping on the idea or something like that, but it actually couldn't be farther from the truth because, let's be 100% clear here, there is literally zero reason to not have an LL format. There's functionally no drawback to it at all. Right? The Living Legend format should be a thing, and if it's your thing, you should enjoy the heck out of it. And in fact, I think that might actually be one of the best parts about the LL format, is being a completely different format from the primary competitive vehicle, which is classic constructed. It really throws aside the typical arguments in the rotation versus creep debate. Now, what do I mean by that exactly, right? So for those of you who've been around TCGs for a long time, we've talked about rotation in either this game or other games, and Living Legend, right? The Living Legend system serves in Flesh and Blood as its rotation system, right? Other games do it when a set moves in, other sets move out, or they have no rotation and they just functionally manage it via creep, right? So some people really dislike the concept of rotation. They want the cards they paid for, that they've become attached to, the heroes in this game that they've come to love. They want to be able to play them forever, and that's completely fair. But on the flip side, if you don't continually refresh, the only way to get those heat rights, so like Starvo, for example, right? Starvo was killing it and crushing it. The only way we would have moved him out without an LL format was to either ban and nerf him into oblivion, which effectively makes him unplayable anyway, or to continue to produce people that could fight him, other heroes that could fight him, which is effectively creep. And then at some point he becomes effectively unplayable anyway. Right, so that's the argument on both, a very summarized argument on both sides of the rotation versus creep. But see, LL is listed as a special format, which means it will fall outside of the normal balanced discussions, and as a format that doesn't impact the primary competitive format of the game, being CC, and Blitz to a lesser extent, much of that argument, at least in this case, I think doesn't hold. Now, we have seen games like Magic actually start to design cards for their side formats within their standard sets, i.e. Commander and so on. And yes, that could be a thing that LSS does in the future, and actually, to be fair, we've already seen them making cards that are clearly UPFs and PvE in their normal sets for a good while now, like Yoji and so on, right? But at least today, we don't have to have that particular battle. We can just enjoy bringing back the old favorites, at least, for a bit. Because, let's be honest, kids, this format is going to be degenerate as all hell. The poster child for the Living Legend format is more than likely going to be Starvo himself. Do you remember how upset people were about how strong and dominant he was at the time? Or remember the days of Ball Lightning Redline Briar? The complaints back then were about how that deck was so simple to play that even mouth breathers could show up and win, undermining Fab being a smart person's game. Well, that's back also. Many fanboys will be happy with Prism's return, and she'll definitely be there as a hero that can take on Starvo. But at the same time, the Ranger players will lament the days of basically being gatekept by their lack of poppers and good old ALS. And what about Drone of Brutality in Oldhim Fatigue in Classic Constructed? Or how about Skelita? Or Duskblade? Remember that card, the one that was never legal? Well, it's legal in this format, so let's see how that goes. Especially in the hands of Chane, because in his prime, he was one of the most powerful heroes the game has ever seen. Now, to be fair, the degeneracy, as we're calling it, might actually be completely irrelevant, at least for now. The old logic of if everything is busted, nothing is busted can certainly apply. But then we get back to, will it all be a somewhat stagnant meta? And I think with all of the recent discussions around hero and design philosophy in Fab 2.0, it's a real chance we won't see heroes as strong for a good while, which means that the strong heroes from earlier will continue to dominate. Now, yes, we don't know how often these tourneys will happen at a competitive level. Maybe they're reserved for special things like Worlds Alone, who knows? But you know as well as I do that it'll only take a couple of these tourneys for folks to start clamoring for bans, which all of a sudden starts to undermine, at least in theory, the whole process. Anyway, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see how even the most passionate no rotation, no ban person doesn't eventually at some point capitulate that something, somewhere, might need to go. And that ultimately is why I find this whole thing to be very fascinating, is because part of me thinks that a year and a half from now, 2 years down the road, we're going to be having some of the same discussions and feelings about bans and rotation on the non-rotation format, but again, we'll have to see. And again, I want to be clear, there is no reason not to do this. It's going to be absolutely fun to see what the crazy kids come up with, what you folks come up with, and how the format ends up turning out over time. So anyway, let me know below what you're thinking. If nothing else, folks, go Commando.